Gibraltar is blessed with a rich variety of natural and human history. The rock and the town below have been home to many cultures and people over the centuries. The artifacts, monuments and memories that remain become our heritage, a common inheritance which we all share. And as Gibraltar moves forward and grows, it is up to us as a society to make sure this heritage endures and becomes a part of our future as well. Leading this effort is the Gibraltar Heritage Trust, an independent statutory body entrusted with the preservation of our heritage, whose aim it is to ensure that modern Gibraltar retains history and heritage at its heart.
My name is Ian Balestrino. I'm the chairman of the Gibraltar Heritage Trust. I've been chairman now for just over 2 years, and I'm doing a second term as chairman. Our heritage is everywhere, it's around us. The ground that we stand on, our cityscape, our landscapes, the gardens that we're in. So it's really us, and heritage is something that we inherit from our forefathers, and it's our duty and responsibility to protect it and to pass it on to future generations. The Heritage Trust started in the 1980s. A group of very sort of concerned and interested individuals got together to try and conserve Gibraltar's historic heritage, and the trust was formed. In fact, it started investigating areas which required an input into the conservation, preservation of our heritage. If I'm not mistaken, studies were undertaken in areas like Parsons Lodge, the Nuns Well in Europa Point, and a few other areas which had been abandoned for a very long time. Since then, it has developed into quite a strong NGO, really, and one that we have a lot of say in a lot of heritage matters in Gibraltar.
My name's Claire Montado and I'm the CEO at the Gibraltar Heritage Trust. I'm the executive to the board of trustees. We've got a board of 12 trustees who are all voluntary. They meet monthly at board meetings, but pretty much once or twice a week on various issues, ranging from planning, building application issues to other heritage sensitive and related queries and projects that we have ongoing. Our aims are governed by the Heritage and Antiquities Act 2018 and the Heritage Trust Act 89 before that, which basically surround three core functions, which are to preserve, promote and educate about Gibraltar's heritage. The trust role has developed a lot over the last couple of decades, I think, since it was set up. I think at the beginning it was very much a pressure group aimed at lobbying to try and preserve Gibraltar's old town, the built fabric. But I think over time it's evolved and taken on many more strands as the board and the strengths of the trustees have allowed. And really in more modern times, I think we've got quite a strong focus on consultation through the planning process. We are a statutory member of the Development Planning Commission, and on that we have a vast number of quite onerous duties really to input on many of the applications that come in. I think in the last 18 months or so we calculated over 850 applications that we've inputted on, some things from as small as a sign within the Old Town to make sure that it keeps with the development plan Old Town guide, to much larger things such as large developments and new estates. So I think that a lot of people don't realise how much work goes on behind the scenes with regards to the planning process and the amount of input that goes into many applications before they get heard at the Development and Planning Commission stage, which really is kind of the final stage if you're going for full planning application or outline planning, which most applications come for in the first run. Our role sometimes increasingly starts before that planning application even gets submitted, and we've been encouraging for the last 10 years or so developers and architects to come to speak to the Trust as early as possible in that planning process. Really engagement for us and early as possible is the key. We don't want to find that when we get up to Development and Planning Commission stage that there's something obvious that we've thought about that hasn't been factored in quite easily at the early stages. And that's happening across the board, not only with private developments but also with government departments. For example, we're consulted on many tenders in the Old Town before they get set up for tender, and we put in our conditions so as to try to iron out as many issues as possible before it gets to that critical stage of a vote being taken around by members around the table.
The role of the trustees is to input into ways and means of maintaining our heritage. There's a diverse number of roles that they carry out, things like preparing reports on sites which are going to come up for development, carrying out research on behalf of developers, on behalf of government as well, of some areas, recording what we have, what heritage is there existing at the moment, in the hope that it is not lost. The situation in Gibraltar regarding the futures of protection and the hurdles that we encounter as a trust are that, we all accept that Gibraltar is very limited space. Gibraltar has to develop. We have to allow for things like housing, office space, etc. That is probably one of our major struggles, shall we say, in a way, is trying to find the balance between progress and maintaining our heritage. It is not always necessary to say that, no, you cannot knock down or demolish this building because it's got, heritage, it was built in 1825 or whatever. But we have to make a case, when the case has merit, to make sure that it is conserved as much as we can.
The planning process is not a one-stop event. Just to illustrate, when a developer or an applicant has they want to do something to their property, redevelop it in any way. If it's a major development and they come to the trust, normally, many times they've also gone to see the town planner, and I think that should always be the first stop. Go see the town planners, ask for their advice. They've got a wealth of information, a wealth of experience working with all sorts of projects in Gibraltar, and they can give you advice on who you should speak to, where you should go, what your first port of call could be. There's a continuous process informing each other with any information that's fed in is all coordinated by the town planners who then feed it back into the system, and when the application is ready to go forward for consideration by the Development and Planning Commission, that's when it goes, and that's in the public meeting that people are becoming so accustomed to now for the past 8 years. I think the open planning process has changed the situation vastly. I think before, not for any other reason other than it just wasn't part of people's everyday. Decisions were made without people realising what the full effect on heritage would be. I think generally it's a really positive step forward and really would encourage people to engage with the planning process, and it's quite an interesting process. I mean, I find it interesting myself.
For me, heritage is being able to know what happened in the past. We are blessed in Gibraltar with a lot of historic assets, and heritage is something which is around us everywhere. It is something that we have inherited from past generations, and it's something that has to be conserved and protected so that future generations are aware of it and can take benefit from it.
We're on top of Wellington Front, which is one of the sections of City Wall which ran from the north of Gibraltar all the way down to the south, and they were critical in defending Gibraltar and making us the fortress that we were. For me, the Wellington Front is an example of those hidden histories that you have all around Gibraltar. It was built in the 1850s, little known that they used convict labour, and that for me is just the history of convicts and convict labour in Gibraltar is just something that's quite interesting, and it's an example of all these different secret histories that there are around Gibraltar waiting to be discovered. I think areas like from here you can see parts of the old town, you can see the new Gibraltar outside the city walls. That standing on something like Wellington Front is kind of like, it's that bridge between the old and the new, and I think it's got a very important part to play in our future and in our everyday lives. It's also important because it's an area that has recently been beautified to show what these walls can bring in terms of recreational areas for people, and it's somewhere that also still has potential. For example, one of the aims of linking up the whole of the city from the north to south via the top of these walls is a relocation of services and things in the area and beautifying it.
We're now in Botanical Gardens. I still call them the Alameda Gardens, which in a spot which has a lot of heritage meaning to me personally. The gardens themselves have a lot of heritage assets within them. In a small area, for a start, we have examples of 11 different guns and cannons here in Gibraltar, all within the Alameda Gardens, ranging from one bronze cannon from 1758 to two examples of not only cannons but Victorian engineering, which is very important. And where we are now, which is called the Knoll, is the spot where it is alleged that General Elliot had his field headquarters during the Great Siege, and he had a tent erected here, and from here he could see across. Obviously nowadays you can't because of all the buildings are in the way. He could see across to the Spanish lines. So it was an area where he was safe away from mortar shells and anything landing in the area. The gardens are also significant, not only because of the tangible assets they have, like the monuments, the various tombs, cannons, etc., also for the open space and the green space it offers our community. And that too is part of our heritage, is having a place where people can relax, where people can contemplate, where people can walk around within a very built-up area. I mean, the gardens are beautiful to walk around. Every little corner has a bit of history. The gardens also offer an area where people can come to have the communion photographs taken, weddings take place here. Is places where people have learned how to ride bicycles, you play football, a lot of other activities which are part of our life, of our history. I mean, everybody says, especially I remember back in the days when the frontier was closed, that people would say, well, venga, let's go for a walk to La Alameda. And people used to come in throngs with the kids and bring their toys and even have picnics in some instances. So really it's something which is part and parcel of our life. The world is moving in a very, very fast pace, but heritage is here to stay. It's here, it's going to be there forever and ever, so we have to protect it and conserve it in whichever way we can find.
Heritage isn't just about the physical, it's also about the intangible and passing on of memories, customs, traditions from generation to generation. And I think the physicality of it kind of like provides that route. And then the shared experiences is what provides that link from the past into the future. So you might have come up to Wellington Front as a child and learned to ride your bike up here. You might bring your children to Wellington Front or to any of the other areas, the Alameda Gardens. Commonwealth Park is a new area that's going to be passed on to future generations and will become part of our heritage. And I think it's really important to always keep that at the forefront of our mind, the way that the past is speaking to us and to the future through the present. And I mean, the Rock of Gibraltar, that's what it's all about. This is why there's a community here. It was a strategic point. People came, wanted to defend this place as an access to the Mediterranean and through the Atlantic. Around that, a community has grown. Defences to defend that community, identities, languages, culture, is just immensely rich, and it's part of the duty of the Trust to try and capture all that and pass it on for future generations.
Formed in 1830, the Royal Gibraltar Police has the distinction of being the oldest police force in the British Commonwealth and the second oldest force in the world after the Metropolitan Police. For much of its history, the Central Police Station in Irishtown was its home until it was decommissioned in 2014. Erected in 1864 under directorship of architect Walter Elliott and built from red brick and Maltese limestone, this neo-Gothic Victorian building was, and still is, an architectural centrepiece in Gibraltar. Now, after falling into dereliction over the last few years, new life will be breathed into this grand, beautiful building, ready to be rejuvenated and brought back into use once again.
My name's Dominic Harvey. I'm Director of AKS Architects and Engineers. AKS is a multidiscipline practice, so we offer architectural, structural and mechanical and electrical services. We try to do the whole package in one office. In Gibraltar there are a lot of heritage buildings. Almost every project that we come across there is some heritage aspect to it. So we're always deeply involved with the Heritage Department and trying to produce projects which take that into account. So it is an important part of what we do. There is so much history in Gibraltar and we're always happy to take that on board, and it does, you know, most of the time it improves the quality of the projects that we deliver. The challenges of working on heritage projects are that, you know, you're dealing with old buildings. They can have structural problems, they can have other types of problems in terms of what you're trying to achieve on the project. So you might not be able to do the project exactly as you want to because you have to incorporate the heritage items. But for us it's a challenge, and for us we work around that to try and come to a solution that works for everyone. And in general terms, as I said, we come up with solutions that actually end up working very well. Whenever we come across heritage buildings or aspects, it is fascinating. It's history, it's always interesting to uncover that and to learn about what went on in that building previously. I personally love history as well, so it's always interesting to find out more about the building, what it was used for, who used it, and also there are often anecdotal stories from local people about you know, what their experience of the building was. Yeah, there are layers and layers of history in many of these buildings. They've often started off with something and then they've been taken over by someone else and they've been used for something else. So there's lots of layers of history, and then obviously we have our client who has bought that building or that plot, and they have their own program of what they want to do with it. So we have to try and accommodate their program onto the existing building. That's quite a challenge. And then from our personal point of view, from the architect's designing point of view, we also try to bring something that's going to look attractive, something that's going to be, as far as possible, environmentally friendly, something that people will appreciate in their daily lives. So we try to add another layer of something positive. So the old police station, that's a project that came to us with a client who had a vision, primarily turning it into office space, but also on the ground floor we have a cafeteria area, and we also have a police gallery area, which was part of one of the kind of selling points that the client put towards the government for winning the tender. So we have the idea of the police gallery will be that it can be used for police exhibitions to tell the local public more about the police service and how it used to work and how it runs today. So that's going to be quite an interesting addition to the old town. And the cafeteria obviously will be a commercial addition. And then the office space above, the idea is to create attractive first-class office space in the centre of town with this kind of new extended skylight that we've designed on top, which will give a real wow factor to the offices at the top of the building. The Trust, obviously, at the planning stage, they're involved. We met with them to get their opinions before going into planning as well, to see what kind of, if the approach that we were proposing would be acceptable. And in general terms, they were happy with that. We've worked with them a lot now, so we generally know what kind of thing they're looking for and what kind of thing they will accept. So we were fairly happy that what we were proposing would be acceptable. They will also have an impact as we go along. We will need to continue consulting with them, particularly as we do the restoration works to the existing facade, which are in very poor condition. So that by the time we get to the end of the project, we hope that we will have a new building which pleases them and our clients and everyone else using the old town.
We're in Irish Town, which is just one of the parallel streets running off Main Street, and we're going to be visiting the Central Police Station to have a look at the works that have been going on there to prepare it for the redevelopment and restoration. Well, it's a prime heritage building in the middle of town. It was until I think about 5 or 6 years ago the Central Police Station. It was purpose-built as a police station. Architect was Samuel Buckle, who was quite an important architect at the time. And we know that the Royal Gibraltar Police are the second oldest police force outside of the Metropolitan Police in London. So it's quite an important history, not just for the building and for Gibraltar, but also in the history of policing and police forces around the world. There's been a lot of coordination between the Ministry for Heritage and the Gibraltar Museum over items of heritage value within the building that need to remain and be protected during the works and remain in situ. So there are a number of fireplaces, there are some safes, the stairs will be retained and protected during the works and will form part of the building in the future and will probably come into use, obviously not as a working fireplace, but will be there as a feature within offices and rooms. We have periodic visits. I think we've been, between the Ministry for Heritage, the Gibraltar Museum and ourselves, I think we've been about 5 or 6 times. They've taken a massive photographic record of the works before the work started and in progress. So today they finished all the soft stripping, and the aim of the visit today is to have a look and see what's left, if there's anything that's been missed in that strip, and to make sure that some of the protection procedures that have been detailed have been carried out, which we've no doubt that they have been. The building received planning permission in 2017, I believe, which is for a restoration of the ground floor in the main building and an extra 2 stories on top, which is quite a modern extension, which was quite controversial at the time, but that will be office space. It's quite an innovative design for Gibraltar, but something that the Trust feels fits in it takes inspiration from the building itself. This building has been in need of quite a lot of care and attention for a long time, and everybody knows the bricks on the outside have been in a state of decay for a long time, the windows, and there's weeds growing out the side, guttering is broken, and it's really needed that investment and attention to bring it back into life again. And this project is a way of achieving that end. Perhaps part of the balance of that is the extra 2 stories on the top, which in an ideal world, perhaps we wouldn't have needed to have that, but that is allowing the ground floor to remain a public space. I think there'll be some sort of cafeteria restaurant and also a public exhibition space with the history of the police force. So I think that's the balance that we need to try and strike when we're working with old buildings in the old town.
The existing building as it is a very beautiful building. You know, it's one of the most attractive buildings in the centre of town, one of the most attractive old buildings, and it uses the brickwork and stonework and some marble columns, and you know the detailing is very good quality, and it was a very good quality building when it was built. It was built to be a centrepiece in the middle of town, and that's what it still is today. So from our point of view, we wanted to respect that. The way that we approached it was to try and treat the extension as a secondary element to the primary building, so that the two didn't really compete. So you have 2 separate elements, the existing police station and the new extension, which the new extension is meant to look like a sculptural glass element on the roof. And the way that we looked at the design was to try and make it almost disappear from street level, so that when you're walking up and down Irish Town or Cloister Ramp, you appreciate mainly the old building, and then on top you see this small glass extension which looks like an interesting, unusual shape object on the roof, and it doesn't actually compete with the main elevation of the existing building. Heritage is very important of every country's culture and background. It reminds us of where we've been, what we've learned. It's definitely worth maintaining. You need to have a balanced body of construction of buildings across the whole spectrum, from old to new, and they're all important. So the old buildings remind us where we've been, and new building tell us a little bit about where we're trying to go. So it's very important to have the full spectrum.